Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. Welcome to the floor of my office that I still have not unpacked. I'm really excited to have a new background. I'm still working on it. I ordered another bookshelf because one was not enough. So I've got another one coming and I'm excited to just kind of like, well, you know, put all of the stuff in all of these boxes away and kind of get things set up how I like them. But at the moment, this is what we've got. I'm pretty sure my May video will be a big improvement from this one. So anyway, even though this was a crazy month, we moved, we went back to school, I've got all these projects going on, I was still able to read quite a bit. These are the physical books that I read, and then I listened to two audiobooks like while I was unpacking and stuff, and that was also really nice. I keep track of all my reading in this little notebook. I just write everything down in here. It looks like this. I kind of like having it like old school. I don't really use Goodreads all that much. I like it. It's just like another platform since I keep track of my reading on Instagram and on YouTube, and then also on bookshop.org. So I always link all of these later on bookshop.org so that if you want to order anything, you can do that without having to go through Amazon, you know? You can support independent bookstores instead. Hello there.
What are you doing out here?
Making a video.
I've been sleeping like in the bedroom.
You were sleeping?
So I opened the door.
Okay. We have our first visitor in the new office. Let's just get on with the books. So the first book that I read in the month of April was Free Food for Millionaires by Min Lee. I was saying on Instagram that I don't love the color. This is set in the 90s and the main character, Casey, has like really kind of wild 90s style. And I would have loved to see that reflected in the cover of the book. She does wear a lot of hats, like that's kind of her thing, so that's why there's a hat on the cover, but like, I don't really picture any of the hats to look like this. But aside from the cover, I really loved this one. It's really long, so the book that I read right before this one was Pachinko, which is also by Min Lee. So within like a week and a half, I read like 1,000 pages of Min Lee. This one is really different from Pachinko just because it's set in the 90s in New York, and it only takes place over the course of like 5 years. So, you know, Pachinko is like multi-generational and it takes place over, gosh, 70 years or something like that. This one is a much more condensed timeline, but it also has like a lot of characters like Pachinko does. But Min Lee is such a good writer that she is able to write all of these characters in such a way that you don't mix them up, you don't get confused about who's who. Even if someone was like speaking, you know, with dialogue, you could tell right away who it is just because they all have such a distinct voice. So it's about this girl named Casey who, you know, doesn't come from a lot of money. Her parents are immigrants from Korea, but she goes to, I think, Princeton, and she wants to work in like finance, you know, on Wall Street or whatever. So she's surrounded by these people in New York that have tons and tons of money, but she doesn't. But she's, you know, just like trying to live in this world. And even though she's the main character, like we also see one of her friends that she grew up with in church who actually does have a lot of money, and then that girl's husband, and we trace his story a little bit, plus her parents, Casey's parents, are main characters here, and kind of the hub where all of these characters meet is their church. They all go to this Korean church in New York, and so we see how religion plays a part in like their expectations and gender norms and what's expected of them as a family and stuff like that. So it's just really, really good. Highly recommend it. It was one of those that I just like couldn't put down. I just had to keep going until I was done with it. But again, please just re-release this with a really fun cover. The next book that I read was an audiobook. It's called Sitting Pretty by Rebecca Tossig. And Sitting Pretty is also her Instagram name, so you can look her up through that. It's a memoir of Rebecca's life as somebody who lives with a wheelchair. When she was a child, I believe she had like a rare form of leukemia that damaged her legs, and so she's just not able to walk like very easily. So she uses a wheelchair to get around. So she talks about just her experiences growing up and the ways that she's kind of formed her identity. She's a teacher, or I don't know if she's still a teacher, but she was for a number of years, and you know, just what that was like as someone who does use a wheelchair. And she just infuses a lot of like disability theory, which is more just like theories about all of our bodies.
Bless me.
Bless you. Like really, all of us have bodies that age and change and are permeable in the sense that like we could get a disease, we could get in an accident, we just, you know, can get sick and tired for a short time and we're not able to do the things that we normally can. So all of us are just living with these bodies that are not machines, right? They do break down, they do require like help. And she talks in the end, I think, about how like basically every invention is an accessibility invention. Like airplanes, for example. Our bodies are not physically able to fly from Los Angeles to New York or walk from Los Angeles to New York. Or if we tried to do that, it would just be too hard and inefficient and we wouldn't be able to get things done. So we created this machine that can do that for us. I think she says even like chairs are really an accessibility invention. We could stand up all the time, but you know, our legs get kind of tired and it's nice to sit down and it makes things more convenient. So when you just look around at the things that you use every day, they are to make your life more convenient. And usually when we specifically ask for inventions that make the world more accessible to people who use wheelchairs, for example, or can't hear as well as others, or can't see as well as others, or something like that, it makes the world more accessible to all of us. Like it's always beneficial to even more people than just like, you know, who is specifically being helped. So I think this theory, like just this idea of talking about our bodies and recognizing that we can't work them 80 hours a week and not get sleep and not rest them or relax them, is something that could really benefit all of us. And there's so much intertwined in her writing, issues of race and gender, and just, I mean, just kind of like work and capitalism and, you know, what we're expected to do with these bodies. So I highly, highly, highly recommend it. There's so many amazing, just quotable lines in the book. I need to get a physical copy. The audiobook is great because she narrates it herself, but it's amazing. I read a lot of books this month that start with how to. So this one is the first book that I've read with the Life's Library book club. This is started by John Green and then Rosanna, I forget her last name, but they've like worked together for a long time on the like Don't Forget to Be Awesome projects and stuff. Love you.
Love you.
His writing reminds me a bit of Hari Kundru, just in the way that they can both just do whatever they want with the English language. Like sometimes you just read a sentence and the way that it's constructed is truly like unique. Like I have never read a sentence constructed that way. So it's definitely just entertaining to read his actual syntax. And then he writes this book entirely in like present tense, second person. So he's saying like, look, unless you're writing one, a self-help book is an oxymoron. You read a self-help book so someone who isn't you can help you, that someone being the author. This is true of the whole self-help genre. It's true of how-to books, for example, and it's true of personal improvement books too. Some might even say it's true of religion books. Some others might say that those who say that should be pinned to the ground and bled dry with the slow slice of a blade across their throats. So it's wisest simply to note a divergence of views on that subcategory and move swiftly on. You just can't even predict, like, what is he gonna say next? So it's a parody of a how-to book, How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia. It never really says who the you is or where this person is, but it's probably like Pakistan. And his definition of getting rich early on is like having a flushing toilet versus having to poop on the ground and wait for rain to wash it away, you know, in his previous life where he was not filthy rich and had a toilet. So it's definitely a mockery of these self-help, get rich quick books. What I had said on Instagram is that if you watched that Rachel Hollis TikTok and you still want to throw up in your mouth a little bit, this book is your Tums. This is what you want to read next. This will help. I truly hope that at least a few people see this title on Amazon and get tricked and buy it and end up reading something that they didn't expect. But it's just so amazingly good. I just want to read everything else that he's written. I've heard, is it called Exit West, I think, is really good. And then he has several more. So yes, I will be picking up more by Mohsen Hamid very soon. Then I read this one, The Fiery Trial, Abraham Lincoln and American Slavery by Eric Foner. And if you're looking for a good historian, kind of just on topics of this time period, like the Civil War and then Reconstruction, Eric Foner is a good author to look up if you're at a bookstore or searching online or whatever. It can be really hard to find good history books. A lot of them are written by journalists and they're not published by an academic press, but they have kind of like the same look and the same cover as books that are, but they're really not done well. And then people read these books by, you know, authors who are actually just like Fox News commentators, and they think that they have learned history and they really haven't. So it can be difficult. So this is one I would recommend, because see, even this one is not published by an academic press, because sometimes authors publish so many books with academic presses that then other presses come along and publish with them. But Eric Foner is a professor of history at Columbia University, so he is a historian and not a journalist. But it can be confusing, which is just why I mention it. So anyway, this book is very interesting because, you know, so many people have a fascination with Abraham Lincoln, and he is so revered in our history. And so this book just takes a single lens to look at Abraham Lincoln and really only looks at his views toward slavery and what he wrote about slavery and about Black people and about, you know, whether or not he believed that they should have voting rights, for example, citizenship, things like that. So through that lens, you do get some of the history of like his growing up and what his family thought about it, and, you know, going into his presidency and stuff, but it's not as simple of a narrative as, you know, some other books about Abraham Lincoln would be. He was pretty into this idea of like ending slavery, but then facilitating Black Americans to Liberia or to somewhere in Africa, you know? So he did want slavery to end because it was tearing the country apart, but he didn't really think that Black and white people would be able to live in America without that also tearing the country apart. And in some sense, he was kind of right. Reconstruction was incredibly violent and fraught. So yeah, you know, if you teach the Civil War and you teach Abraham Lincoln, this is a good book to read because it gives you a little bit more nuance. We have to be careful, you know, when we're teaching these people who are like national heroes, and just careful that we're not perpetuating anything that actually wasn't true. But I do recommend it. Pretty readable. Not as readable as the Counter-Revolution of 1776, which I reviewed last week, but still very good. Another history book for you that's even more readable, and I would actually recommend this one probably first to any US history teachers who need a bit more of like an overview of US history. If you would like to read a book over the summer just to prepare yourself a little bit better for next year, this is one that I would recommend. So this is by Heather Cox Richardson, who has really just kind of like led a lot of us through this really fraught election season and post-election season. So she is a very, very well-renowned historian. She started writing on Substack. I think she's like the most popular person on Substack. And then she also publishes the same thing, like daily, to Facebook. And so she's literally the only good thing on Facebook. So you can read her daily like recaps of the news based in historical context, because she is a US historian, and as she sees the news, she sees patterns and things that have occurred before and strategies that political parties have used before, and she sees them like being recycled. So that's what this book is about. Did I say the title? How the South Won the Civil War, Oligarchy, Democracy, and the Continuing Fight for the Soul of America. So basically her argument is that in the South, slave owners really did not want democracy. They wanted an oligarchy, and their argument was that it's best for everybody if this elite group of people has all the power, will take care of everybody else. You know, there's like that paternalism. Obviously, no black people should be in charge, no women should be in charge, etc. And even after the South lost the Civil War, this political strategy remained, and it fit especially well into the politics of the West. And it's so funny that, you know, we have all this propaganda, all these Western movies about these like self-made men and cowboys who just do everything on their own. They don't need the government. When the government was out there clearing the land, committing genocide to clear it for white Southerners, usually, who had lost a lot of their power or land or like means of production in the South, and so then they go west. People were paid to like clear the buffalo, water rights. She doesn't get into that as much here, but like that was huge. So the government was incredibly involved in the formation of the West, but the political strategy of like, we should be in charge of this, and it's very hands off, but it really isn't. That like just still continued into the West, and it also is very, very based in like the extractive economic models, so of like cotton or mining or ranching. So, you know, the North is different because their economic models are a little bit different, having to do a lot more with factories, and like those factories can't run without the extraction that the other regions are doing, but she doesn't really get into that. So anyway, it's just very relevant to today. The last couple of chapters about like the movement, conservatives and Reagan, and still this whole like mythology about the West and the cowboys and how, you know, the government shouldn't give you any handouts. Just let it serve the oligarchy, just let it serve these people at the top, and then it will trickle down, it'll be fine for everybody. And that narrative is really, really powerful. So anyway, highly, highly recommend this. I finally have a door that I can shut, but Jensen is right on the other side of it. Being very, very loud. The next book that I read was another audiobook. I listened to this while I unpacked. It's called Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolker. This was on like Obama's reading list from last year, and so I saved all of those books and trying to go through some of them. This one feels like a podcast, not just because, you know, I listened to it on an audiobook, but also because it's a little bit like episodic. It feels like just a really well done journalistic podcast. So the chapters, I was gonna say episodes, kind of flip-flop between the history of this family, a real family that existed, and then the history of the study of schizophrenia among the medical community and you know, psychologist and psychiatrist community. So this family, the Galvin family, there's a mom and a dad. They meet in New York, and then he's in the military. They end up moving out to Colorado. They're Catholic. They have 12 children. The first 10 are boys, and then the last 2 are girls. And one by one, as they reach kind of late adolescence, a lot of the boys begin displaying symptoms of schizophrenia, and eventually 6 out of the 10 boys have like full-fledged schizophrenia. But what is it? What exactly does that mean? How can you treat it? And because all of these boys are related, they have the same mother and father, and were raised in the same household. They seem like the perfect case study for this long posed question about like mental illness. Like, is it genetic? Is it nature? Or is it nurture? Is it a part of your circumstances? So they do have all the same DNA. They were also raised in the same household. So what can, researchers learn from them? But it's definitely not a cold book, just like only about the research. It's very, very, very personal, and it gets into the really intimate details of their lives. And I just have to give you a trigger warning for sexual abuse. There's a lot of discussion of sexual abuse in this book, particularly from the daughters, the two youngest girls, and then also among the boys and even other members of the family. So that was, it's not like gratuitous at all. It's hard to listen to. It's hard to hear about everything that they went through. So I really highly recommend this book. I feel like it kind of goes well with Sitting Pretty and just the fragility of our minds and our bodies. And we don't necessarily have as much control over those things as we think we do. So I think those two kind of align pretty well. The next book that I read was Ghost by Jason Reynolds. I just pulled this one from my classroom library. A lot of my students have read this one. I've read a lot of other Jason Reynolds, but I hadn't read the track series. Oh, but if you couldn't tell, I was trying to read like all yellow books because I read these two and then I was like, man, these are gonna be like hard to work into like a stack for the end of the month. Like, these are such kind of odd colors. So I was like, maybe I'll just go like all yellow as much as I can, or kind of like off-white-ish. But anyways, so yeah, that's why I grabbed this one. I was like, here's a yellow book, and I've been wanting to read this one. So very, very good, just like all of Jason Reynolds' books. Very appropriate for middle school. This is about a 7th grader, and I don't know why I feel like it's Atlanta where they live. I don't think they really say where it is, but feels like it is. His dad is out of the picture. His mom has to work a lot. He's just on his own quite a bit. He has trouble regulating his anger sometimes at school, but he's a really good runner. And so he joins this track team. Oh, I just put them in that round thing instead. Unpacking drama. Anyway, this is just written in a way that kids will really enjoy it. It keeps you reading, like you really want to know what happens next. There's a lot of tension because he does something like wrong, but kind of for the right reasons at the beginning, and then you're just like wondering if he's gonna get caught for it or like what the consequences will be. You don't really want him to get caught, but eventually he's gonna have to like reckon with this thing. So it's really good, and I have the next book ready to go, so maybe I'll read all orange books next month. My third how-to book of the month is called How to Change Everything by Naomi Klein. And this is for young adults. It says The Young Human's Guide to Protecting the Planet and Each Other. And it's really, really, really good. I want all of my students to read this. I would love to like find a way to incorporate this in my English class. Now I kind of want to do like literature circles of like nonfiction. This would be a really good nonfiction book. So it explains really well the science behind climate change and like what's going on and what has been going on for centuries. It does a great job of that. And then it also highlights a lot of kind of current events, like DAPL pipeline, Hurricane Katrina, rising water levels in like Micronesian islands. And so then it kind of zooms in on how climate change is affecting specific areas and specific people right now. It also highlights different activists, and most of them are like, young activists. And it gives history of like the environmental movement and like the history of just like thinking about the earth as something that you can just like take from and extract from. It reminded me of the Heather Cox Richardson book, like that idea versus we are part of nature, we are part of the earth. We don't want to abuse and disrupt and deplete the earth because we would be doing that to ourselves. There's like an added chapter in the end about the pandemic and how that is related to just the way that we treat the earth and treat animals, and like sometimes cause animals and humans to come into closer contact than they would have otherwise. And that can lead to these viruses that jump from animal species to human species. And it's just really, really, really good. So definitely pick this one up for your classroom. And then finally, of course, I had to get The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman. Her speech at the inauguration just stopped me in my tracks. So I wanted to have it in book form like this so that I can use it a little bit more as a teaching tool. Look, she's got her picture there on the back. One of my favorite lines is, "Because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it." So let me know down below what was one of the lines that really stuck out to you in this poem. So beautiful, so good. It'd be nice to get, you know, like a class set of these and allow students to just engage with the poem. So I have a feeling this poem is going to be used in classrooms for many years to come. Okay, so this is all of the books that I read in April. I need to get back to unpacking. Next week I'll have an apartment tour for you, so don't forget to come back to this channel next week on Sunday morning and you'll be able to see our whole beautiful old apartment that I do not miss because we have more space here. But I think it's so fun to just kind of like, I don't know, get to peek into people's apartments and houses. So that'll be up next week. And then at the end of the month, I have some really exciting book news coming up. So definitely stay tuned for that. I've got a video that's been like almost a year in the making. I think in 2 weeks, that one will be coming out. So anyways, thank you for being here with me today and I'll see you next week. Bye.